Just so you know, it's hard for a preacher to preach for 3 minutes at a time. This is tricky. And speaking of being tricky, this is a tricky day for you. I've never seen a VBS where you have a whole day talking about someone who died or how someone was killed. This is tricky to talk, especially with the smaller ones. The whole day is the crucifixion. But we can't get through talking about our faith without talking about this, of course. There's a couple different parts of Mark that you're going to look at. Mark chapter 14, Mark chapter 15. Mark chapter 14 is Jesus talking about him going to be crucified, Jesus knowing that it's coming. And there's Mark chapter 15, and that's what I'm going to read, just a few bits of that, just to remember what we're talking about. In Mark chapter 15, verse 21, and they compelled a passerby, Simon of Cyrene, who was coming from the country, the father of Alexander and Rufus, to carry his cross. And they brought Jesus to the place called Golgotha, which means place of the skull. And they offered him wine mixed with myrrh, but he did not take it. And they crucified him, and divided his garments among them, casting lots for them, to decide what each should take. And it was the 3rd hour when they crucified him. And the inscription of the charge against him read, "The King of the Jews." And with him they crucified 2 robbers, one on his right and one on his left. And those who passed by derided him, wagging their heads and saying, "Aha! You who would destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days, save yourself and come down from that cross." So also the chief priests with the scribes mocked him to one another, saying, "He saved others, he cannot save himself. Let the Christ, the King of Israel, come down now from the cross, that we may see and believe." Those who were crucified with him also reviled him. And when the 6th hour had come, there was darkness over the whole land until the 9th hour. And at the 9th hour, Jesus cried out with a loud voice, "Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani," which means, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Let me ask you a couple of questions, see what you think. Who thinks the world started with Adam and Eve? I'm raising my hand. You don't have to raise your hand. You can mentally assent if you want. Was there a great flood and a huge ark? Forget the movie that's out now. Was there a great flood and a huge ark? I think so. Did folks build a tower that got so high that God had to say, "Stop that," and mixed up all the languages, and that's why you have to take German in school, right? Or French? Yeah. Did a lady turn into a pillar of salt? Did frogs and flies and locusts overrun a nation and bring the people to their knees and the leader to their knees? Yeah, I believe all of those things. But we have to be honest, outside of the Bible, there isn't much evidence for them, is there? Outside of the Bible, there's not a lot of evidence against them either, just so you know. People don't have reasons not to believe. But perhaps the second greatest event in the history of the world is not only recorded in the Bible, but it's backed up by historical accounts and dozens of religious texts. And that's the story that we just looked at. This is the fact that Jesus died on a cross 2,000 years ago. This is probably the most verifiable Bible event in history. But you know what? All of that doesn't really matter much to me in my faith. See, if I base the truth of the Bible on historical accounts, if I based the truth of the Bible on archaeological records, if I based the truth of the Bible on anything outside the Bible, I wouldn't have a lot to go on, honestly, for much of Genesis through Revelation. But when we read what the Bible tells us from the Old Testament through all the way to the New, we see that there's a story that it couldn't have gone any other way. Isaiah wrote of a servant who would suffer and who would be executed with criminals. Sound familiar? Psalms tells us again and again of a Messiah who would be falsely accused and irrationally hated. Jesus, over and over again, though they couldn't hear it or understand, told his followers that he would die. Even Thomas and Peter said, "Jesus, if you're going to die, we'll just die right along with you." Jesus' followers saw him die. The Roman soldiers saw him die. The religious leaders saw him die. I don't know what it takes to mock a person dying on a cross, but they had it in them, right? And they saw him die. The crowds saw him die. His friends saw him die. His mother saw him die. But what we see is that's the whole plan. From the first bite of the fruit in the garden, that was the plan that was leading to the death of Jesus Christ, our Savior. The death that would defeat sin, the death that would purchase our freedom, the death that would defeat death in the end, the death that would open up, most importantly, a way back to God for everyone. See, why do we have hope? Remember, again, It says, defend your faith, not because you want to win the argument. Defend your faith so you can give an answer for your hope. Why do you have hope that tomorrow can be better than today? Why do we have hope that we have eternity that will be better than now? How do I know that I have a God who loves me and wants me to know Him? Because of the cross. That's what we can tell them. Because we have a God who didn't hold anything back. We have a Savior who didn't hold anything back, including His life. And like I said, the most verifiable event in the Bible is that Jesus died. Our hope rests in the fact not just that Jesus died, but that Jesus died for us. That God gave us a Savior, God gave us His Son to die for us. That's the hope that we're offering the kids, and that's the hope that we have. And the hope that we can offer other people when they ask.